Grigo's father, determined to reform his spoiled son, spent big money hiring a film crew to give Grigo an immersive time travel experience. He first used a tranquilizer gun to knock Grigo out, and when Grigo groggily woke up, he had become a slave on a landowner's estate. Before he could even get his bearings, a man not only dragged him out but scolded him for not working properly. Apparently he hadn't tied up the horses in the stable on time, then gave him a vicious lashing with a whip. This was a 200-year-old village recreated by the film crew, where all the villagers were professional actors guided by a head director who gave commands to each performer. Every fight scene had to look absolutely realistic, all designed to make Grigo believe he had actually traveled back to the 19th century. But while Grigo was spoiled, he wasn't stupid. He figured this was some kind of reality show. He told the villagers to stop joking around and demanded that Jack return his phone and personal belongings. Faced with Jack's puzzled expression, he still didn't buy it. So he turned around decisively and ran toward the outside. But the scenes along the way made him increasingly confused if this really was a reality show like he thought. There should be cameras everywhere. Just as he was about to cross the fence, he saw a real bear roaring at him. Now he was completely convinced he had traveled through time. Soon he was captured and brought back, facing execution for the serious crime of a slave attempting to escape. To make Grigo believe this really was the 19th century, they had to make the performance even more realistic. So on the way to the execution ground, the crew arranged for a slave to have his hand chopped off. The terrified Grigo was then brought to the scaffold and had the noose placed around his neck. In his panic, he said his father was very wealthy, but according to the script, the villagers would only think he was talking nonsense. When he realized his father couldn't save him either, he truly began to panic. But since he was the protagonist, the director certainly wouldn't let his story end there. Just as he was about to be executed, a girl in a red dress came riding up on horseback. She was Mary, the landowner's daughter, and the female lead the crew had arranged for Grigo. Her character was a kind, gentle girl, and her script called for her to save Grigo and then become his girlfriend, complete with romantic scenes. As the plot developed, she might even have to live with him indefinitely. Mary said today was her coming-of-age ceremony and she didn't want anyone punished on such a beautiful day. Coincidentally, the landowner was a father who doted on his daughter, so the man immediately ordered all prisoners pardoned. Just like that, the confused Grigo was released, his legs weak with relief. He didn't notice an eagle flying overhead, but it wasn't really an eagle. It was a drone. The drone flew into a distant windmill, which housed a modern command center that controlled the entire village. Every villager had a dedicated earpiece, and the director and crew used radio to direct the actors from there. To prevent exposure, they even stationed a sniper who would immediately tranquilize Grigo if there was any risk of discovery. Not far from the windmill was an actor's break room where performers would gather to chat and memorize lines when they weren't on set, since they couldn't say anything related to modern life. Although Grigo had escaped death, he still had to continue working in the stables as a slave. That night, lying in the smelly stable, he thought about everything that had happened that day and became completely convinced he had traveled through time. He decided to survive and find a way to travel back. But by the second day at mealtime, he could barely stand it anymore. The crude food was unbearable, and using the bathroom was extremely difficult too. No toilet paper, only grass and leaves, and he constantly had to watch out for and fend off other people. Though this forest wasn't his private property, these past 2 days he kept feeling like someone was watching him. And indeed someone was, to prevent the facade from falling apart. The director's team watched him constantly, even when he went to the bathroom. Over the next few days, Grigo was beaten and verbally abused by the man for either slacking off at work or not working efficiently enough. Having always been arrogant and domineering, Grigo was used to looking down on others and had never been humiliated by anyone else before. He felt extremely wronged inside. The director saw this as an opportunity for change, namely, the landowner's daughter Mary. Her script called for her to encounter Grigo by chance, make him fall in love with her, then marry and have children to make Grigo faithful in love. One day Grigo saw Mary crying by a haystack, which caught his attention. When Grigo inquired, Mary followed the script and explained that her father was forcing her to marry an 80-year-old wealthy man. Everyone expected Grigo to feel pity and comfort her, but suddenly Grigo asked if the man was very rich. Mary obviously hadn't expected things to turn out this way. Grigo said that even if she married an 80-year-old, she'd only need to wait a few years before she'd be free again. Then he just left. Not only was Mary very confused, but the director and Grigo's father were both frustrated. They hadn't expected Grigo to have no sympathy at all. One day Grigo stole a chicken. Jack wanted Grigo to put the chicken back in the coop, but Grigo, driven crazy by the crude food, didn't want to return this hard-won meat. He even planned to use the feathers to make himself a pillow. Soon after, Grigo ate the entire chicken without sharing even a sip of broth with his companions. The director thought this presented an opportunity for change, so he wrote a new script overnight. The next day, when the man discovered the missing chicken, he questioned all the slaves about who had stolen it. After no one answered for a while, he gave everyone two choices. If someone confessed voluntarily, they'd only get 10 lashes. But if no one confessed, he'd randomly grab a scapegoat and give them 50 lashes. In this test of conscience, Griggo chose selfishness, following the script. The man grabbed Jack and beat him severely. Afterward, Jack's back was covered in wounds, but he didn't betray Griggo. Everyone thought this loyalty would make Griggo's conscience torment him, but having been used to rebellion, he was accustomed to friends taking the blame for money, so not only did he feel no guilt, he actually looked down on Jack even more. Hearing these words, the wealthy father was completely enraged. Just as he decided his son was beyond reform and was about to have the director end this farce, an accident occurred. When a girl dismounted from her horse, her skirt accidentally lifted up, and Griggo saw she was wearing modern shorts. At first he teased the girl playfully, but then he realized these were modern pants and rushed over to examine her skirt. Just when the director thought they were about to be exposed, Griggo didn't see the pants under the girl's skirt. She had reacted quickly enough to remove them and hide them in a pile of grass. Griggo thought he was hallucinating from wanting to go home too badly. Coming back to his senses, he apologized to the girl for his rude behavior. This was the first time in Griggo's life that he had apologized to anyone, and the wealthy father was very pleased to see his son's change. Leah also accepted Griggo's apology, and to ease the tension, she jokingly said that because of his antics, her parents thought she could no longer marry anyone else, so he'd have to marry her. This was just a joke from the girl, but Griggo took it seriously. From that day on, whenever he had free time, he would come to Leah's side. But the current situation was completely different from what the director and the wealthy father had envisioned. Mary was supposed to be the female lead. To get the plan back on track, the director added another scene where Mary appeared to resist marrying the 80-year-old man and crouched in the water in front of Griggo. The plan went smoothly. Griggo immediately rescued her and put her in the carriage. Next came the romantic scene the director had arranged, with Mary using every reason she could think of to try to get Griggo to stay. But Griggo didn't pay much attention to her and simply closed the door and left. He was only interested in Leah now, so the director had no choice but to change Leah from a supporting character to the female lead. Under Griggo's passionate pursuit, Leah became his girlfriend. While they were in the throes of romance, the director thought it was time for a subplot. One day the landowner brought Griggo to the dining room and prepared a feast for him. When Griggo was almost full, the landowner said his son had knocked someone down while riding in town and needed a slave to take the punishment. Afterward, he would not only free Griggo from slavery but also give him a house and help him marry Leah. Seeing that Griggo was still hesitating, the landowner threw in another condition: if he agreed right now, he could immediately get a watermelon. Griggo immediately said taking the blame was what he was best at. He knew that if he didn't agree today, things would become much harder for him later. When Jack returned to the stable and saw the watermelon rinds, he thought Griggo had eaten everything by himself again. But this time Griggo had learned to share. Soon the law enforcement officer came to the village, and because he was taking someone else's punishment, Griggo was severely punished. With each lash, Griggo couldn't stay calm from the pain, and each lash was like a baptism for him. Although all this was arranged by the wealthy father, he still couldn't bear to watch. The next day, Griggo went to the landowner's house to get his freedom papers, but unexpectedly the landowner's son broke his word. Not only did he not honor the agreement, he humiliated Griggo as well. The director expected Griggo to fight back, but he still chose to be cowardly. He was inherently a coward. That evening, Griggo and Leah lay on the haystack chatting. When he talked about being humiliated by the landowner's son that day, he had clenched his fists and his anger had reached its peak. But he didn't resist, because watching the landowner's son's behavior was like seeing his former spoiled self. The wealthy father was very excited. Griggo was finally beginning to reflect on himself. In the days that followed, Griggo worked hard, finished his tasks early, and went on dates with Leah. They went boating and walking together. One day while walking with Leah, Griggo confessed that he was actually a time traveler. He said his past rebelliousness came from his father being too busy making money to care about him at all, so he could only go out and play. While Leah pretended not to understand what time travel meant, she also changed her opinion of Griggo. At first she had looked down on him, thinking he was just a typical spoiled rich kid, but after spending these days together, she found that she seemed to have developed real feelings for him.